welcome to this week's edition of Military Trailblazer Office Hours, everyone. Thanks for taking the time out of your Wednesday evening and spend it here in the spirit of community mentorship and learning. I'm your host, Dave Albright, being assisted by the real host, Dave Nava, in the background. I'm a lead solution engineer at Salesforce and a military trailblazer. So each week, as many of you know, we invite a co-host or co-host to take part in the conversation so we can leverage their experience, expertise, and unique perspectives. And the focus for tonight's session is exploring Salesforce services delivery at a global systems integrator. So with that, I'd like to welcome and briefly introduce our co-host for tonight's session, Alex Calder. Alex is a Salesforce Delivery Lead at Accenture, a large firm specializing in information technology services and consulting. Alex has worked for Accenture for over 14 years in various roles related to project management as well as solution delivery management. Alex, it's great to have you co-hosting Office Hours with me, and welcome. Would you like to take a quick moment to further introduce yourself and share your Salesforce story?
Yes, absolutely. For most of you, good afternoon, good evening. For those of us here over in APAC, good morning. So thank you very much for inviting me on today. It's a privilege to be able to speak to you all in a forum like this. This is my first time, so please be gentle with me. So yes, Alex Calder, 14 years working for Accenture across the globe. So my journey started around delivery leadership probably from an early age in my professional career, which was really, I wanted to be a project manager. That was where I thought my skills and my talents would lie. So I did a university degree in the UK in business information systems management because it sounded just about right. And I duly forgot the IT industry and went into the building industry, which is where I started actually some of my project management experience. Family-run industry, and I worked there for a few years until 2008 when the GFC kindly put pay to most of the construction industry in the UK. And that was when Accenture came calling. When I joined Accenture, I think there was 125,000 people in the firm. Now it's about 710. So we have this lovely statistic in Accenture that you can go in and find. And I found it this morning that 93.4% of Accenture's employees started after I did. So I'm one of the old folk now, and I feel old. So first of all, for those of you who thinking about ever working for an SI or somebody like Accenture, the brief thing I'll tell you is that it gives you a whole lot of opportunities. And I've been very grateful across the years to take some of those opportunities and move around the world and industries and find myself to where I am at the moment. So I started 2008 and I started in a PMO, as a PMO analyst. So really learning the ropes of project delivery in IT, and that was in telecoms at the time. So that was helping project managers make sure they've got their project plans, zip shape and Bristol fashion, and making sure they adhere to the governance and guidelines that were set out for them. So that's kind of gave me a start on the path of project management in the IT industry. And then I moved to run a PMO when I moved to Australia back in 2010 in the oil and gas industry. I worked in those sorts of roles 2-3 years, and then I moved into financial services and started to run my own small project teams. So I was working in SAP at the time. So I started to run small SAP projects, and that was where I really started to build on that knowledge and understanding of project delivery and implement it for my own sake. And then again, I did that. I had a few other opportunities. So I was moving around Australia at the time, Brisbane, Sydney, and then I moved into test management, which was interesting, not probably my passion, but I moved into test management. That offered me the other opportunities I worked in Mauritius for a period of time, which was quite pleasant, which I wouldn't have had an opportunity had I been working probably somewhere else. And then I came back to Australia, and there was this project coming up, and it was a Salesforce project, and I knew the project manager that was going to be leading it, and I said, Salesforce, I know about Salesforce. This is one of the next big things in our industry. It was already a big thing, but we hadn't been working in it too much around Australia. I said, I want to be on that project. And it was probably the best phone call and set of emails and pestering that I've done whilst I've been here. So I've been Salesforce in a delivery leadership role in one shape or another since 2017 now. And I'm currently running another project in Brisbane. So I've moved again in the higher education industry. So
right.
lots of travel, lots of opportunity. Not probably quite as much day-to-day travel as some of you might have in the States, or at least used to have in the States, because I know consulting is a little bit different there. But in Australia, that's quite a lot of moving around.
Well, thank you very much for volunteering to be with us tonight and help us host the session. For everyone joining for the first time, we always like to briefly explain the purpose of these office hours before we open the floor for questions and discussion and let Alex talk more. These sessions are an informal get-together for gathering with military trailblazers and allies to explore non-technical Salesforce career and branding-related topics to help you achieve professional development and career-related goals. The next hour is intended to be an opportunity for collaborative mentorship. Everyone on the call is encouraged to step up and help answer questions from your perspective, since we have folks with all kinds of different backgrounds. This provides additional diversity of experience to the answers given. Please keep an eye on the chat window during tonight's session. I'll put stuff out and others can feel free to share as much information as you'd like in the chat. Include learning, networking, and employment opportunities. And if you'd like to ask a question at any point during tonight's session, please feel free to do so. If you don't feel comfortable speaking up, which I understand, you can also post your questions in chat. I'll do my best to monitor the chat window, make sure we're covering everything. I'll also be looking for raised hands. Finally, tonight's session is being recorded. If you'd like to share an attribution-free comment, please let me know before you're speaking, and we'll make sure it's edited out for the final recording. So with that, I'll open it up and give it back to Alex and let him talk about the role, and anyone has questions, feel free. Alex, what do you have?
Okay, well, I'll give you a day in the life of me and my project. So most of the time, I'm the first in the office, just like today, although probably a little bit earlier today than usual. That's my quiet time. That's the time that I actually manage to go away and get some work done, because as soon as people start coming on, email starts happening. You guys don't use Teams, but Teams, once the world comes alive, my day gets very busy. So early mornings are a must for me. I generally jump into Jira as the tool that I use most of the time. And my first thoughts are around checking around delivery metrics, how we going, how we tracking, so I can get an idea of things that I need to talk about with the team later in the day. Team stand-ups first in the morning. I have a team stand-up with all of my onshore leadership, cross-functional, technical, testing, change management in the mornings. And that's really important, I find. Having that touch point at the beginning of the day, setting the goals, expectations with the team of what we need to concentrate on and those priorities, I think are very important. Also, it gives me an opportunity to find out how things went yesterday and what the guys actually have planned today. And then, as I said, kind of after that, the day can take me anywhere. I've worked on large projects, 100+ developers. Here at the moment, it's not quite as large a project, and I've got my hands probably in more of the day-to-day than I've done previously. So the day can take me anywhere, but usually it's busy. Lots of meetings, process, problems and issues, production issues, reporting, governance calls, all sorts of stuff. So days can be quite varied with that regard. But I do like to keep an eye on process and process management. I feel that's probably the thing that I spend most of my time looking at the moment, is making sure that scope and stories are maintaining the processes that they're supposed to when they're being fed into the team, as well as I've got quite a big offshore delivery team. And making sure that those guys are on track, doing things they should be, finding the issues, problems in the pipelines, merge conflicts, and making sure that people are being reminded that they need to get those things sorted out in a timely fashion. Working in Salesforce now for a long time. I say a long time for me.
It's a long time. 14 years. You're like an old timer in Salesforce.
Well, only about five years in Salesforce, right? And there are some nuances to Salesforce, especially around development control and those processes, which I guess the The methodology might be similar across different IT platforms, but I spend a lot more time in these Salesforce projects talking about keeping the pipeline scheme, keeping test classes good, making sure that we can deploy things when we need to, etc., etc. So that's something that I spend a lot of time looking at, more time than I probably would like at the moment. And then again, a delivery lead at an SI, it's not just about delivery of the project, performance metrics. I have to deal with commercials, so new extensions, new work. Commercials is a part of my role. Didn't actually used to be. There used to be kind of more people that spent their time focused on building new work and new business. I think in the new world of IT, delivery lead's role is not just delivery. It's actually making sure that you're building and fostering those relationships with your clients and building that pipeline of work as you go. And I think it's actually a good thing, and not an easy thing for a delivery lead to take on as well. But once you build these relationships with clients and you build an element of trust and they trust you, it's easy to have those conversations about new work and building that pipeline of opportunities. And then, as I paid reference to a little while ago, I've got a whole raft of administration tasks that I might have to do throughout the day. So just to name a few. Some of this is internal to working for Accenture, some of this is external. Reporting around performance, financials, risks. There is an element of just resourcing. Then there's people management and managing subcontractor arrangements, to name but a few. So yeah, maybe I break there and see if there's any sort of questions.
I think a delivery lead like that, 14 years experience, 5 with Salesforce, the level of complexity of what you have to deal with on a daily basis is pretty broad. What do you think the common career trajectory would be for a Salesforce delivery lead?
Well, in my world, there you kind of grow in different levels of delivery leadership. So I'm working on a small project at the moment. Is probably I would be comfortable moving into sort of medium to large scale projects. So in the delivery leadership bands, you would have those sorts of levels of responsibilities that you would grow into naturally. So you might start by running a small piece of work or a stream of work in a project and kind of take that on from a delivery leadership perspective, and running smaller projects. But then obviously we run some very large scale projects. My previous one to this was multi-year, 125 developers at one point, big teams. That kind of responsibility is another level up. So I'd say there's different levels of delivery leadership in my world. After that, I think it's more around what do you want to do. If you want to stay in delivery leadership, then there's no issues with that. But if it's one of those things that you feel you grow out of, or you've got more to give back to the community, we have roles which are more around quality assurance. So you may work across multiple projects and visit them and do kind of risk assessments and make sure that what they're doing and how they're doing things are right, and helping manage those risks where you see them. And also at a higher level, managing those relationships across the Salesforce portfolio of work in maybe the industries that you're familiar with.
So I think, Dave Naba and I, and a lot of folks who are on here, we came from a delivery background. So I have a very fond affinity to the delivery side, because I think, and especially for the audience we have on here, where a lot of people are breaking into the ecosystem, delivery is a great place to get that experience, right? And it comes at you very fast. What thoughts do you have on that, on coming into delivery and starting a job in there?
Well, so when you say delivery, do you mean like coming in as a developer or an architect, or do you mean coming in at that kind of leadership, project management type of role?
Project management and really system integration, kind of delivery. So on the post-sale side and delivering the product, right? Doing the full build and configuration.
Yeah, I mean, for me, you've got to learn the nuances of a Salesforce implementation pretty quickly. And I've learned some of these the hard way. Getting the processes in place, and I know there's another gentleman on this call that's feels strongly about this, and so do I now. It's getting the processes in place to make sure that from the bottom up, you can be successful. So making sure your development teams, you've got pipeline management processes, you've got developer code of conducts, you've got those sorts of checkpoints and governance in place right from the very beginning. You need to be clear on that from the beginning, on how you expect things to work. If you don't have that in place, it doesn't matter how good your team of functional consultants are, solution architects are, how good all of that is done, you'll never get anything out of the door, and you'll spend all your time and your hours of the day chasing stuff in environments that's working or not working, and you don't know how confident you are that everything's in the right place at the right time. So for me, number one thing is from a technical perspective, and believe me, I am not the most technically savvy person on this call by a country mile, but from a technical perspective, you need to get those things in place really early and have those visions. If you've got people to lean on who can help you develop and implement those DevOps processes, those developer guidelines, that governance, then make sure you utilize those people, as and when you can, to help you get off on the right foot.
Yeah, I agree. I think when you come into the IT industry, is you think it's just sitting in front of a computer coding all day, but there's so much other stuff that happens. When you look at Agile and Agile methodology and sprints and user stories and things like that, it's far more than you ever think. Adam, I see you have a question.
Sorry, just one more thing before we go to Adam, because I know he's desperate to say something about DevOps. When you scale, if you're working in a small project and maybe you've got a couple of people onshore and they're the only guys you've got working on things, okay, you can get by. But when you scale projects, when you've got 10, 15, 20, 30 people offshore working in the same environment, it's critical to have these processes in place. It's the best.
Alex, I should start by saying that me and Alex have worked on a few programs together, and he's one of our finest in Australia, I think. I would, David, you put it, I guess you use the word agile. So if you are looking at go down delivery lead, you can go and look at those things, those project management or agile kind of trailheads on or modules on Trailhead. The Dev Lifecycle cert is a pretty good all-round cert for application lifecycle management. So understanding, what Alex was saying before, understanding the nuances of the Salesforce delivery, understanding the nuances of getting change from multiple sandboxes on the path to production. Alex said that, over 100 developers. You can imagine how you need to multi-team and multi-stream, but also, there's the managed service side as well. So looking at that operate, and I think that Dev Lifecycle Architect cert, is a cert that would do you well if you wanted to go down that path.
To give an example, guys, something that maybe didn't go as well as we had planned. The first implementation I did with my last client, which was a very big implementation. The first one, my lead had gone to the Philippines to oversee the week before and the week after our first go live. We left. I'm hoping most of you are familiar with the green wheels and Salesforce deployments. I left him at 6 p.m. in Australia with the team just kicking off, ready to go, full of excitement and anticipation. And I logged back on at 7, I think it was maybe 7 in the morning. So about 12 hours later, expecting to get an update, things going okay, a few bumps. And they basically they'd all they had achieved some things, but had basically done nothing in 12 hours. And the team were just strewn across the office, kind of sleeping where they could. So it's those sorts of experiences where you really learn that stuff is so important, because otherwise you just never go live. You never go live. Everybody's legs can be going a mile a minute doing stuff every day, but unless you get those processes right, you never go live.
Yeah, I think that's what I learned from delivery, right? Everything is always about that go live date, right? And you're always driven by that, and it's coming whether you want it to or you're ready for it or not. So you've got, and I think that was, for me personally, working in there, that there's a stress that comes with that, right? There's some sleepless nights where you roll over at 2 a.m. and you're like, I think I just figured it out. And, you quietly get out of bed, step over the dog and go in front of the computer and work. And much like you, I think in this industry, I tend to work very early in the morning because Slack hasn't started, Teams hasn't started, text hasn't started. And it's one of those few times that you can truly focus, which is hard to do in today's world. Let's see. So regarding hard skills, you kind of talked about it a little bit with certs. Adam kind of hit on certs. You think it's necessary to have a college degree or a Salesforce certs to be competitive in applying for a role in that type of job?
Again, I think me of maybe 5 years ago would have said absolutely. Nowadays, I think experience is as much of a benefactor in this process as anything. I think if you're able to get yourself certified and qualified and be able to talk the talk and know what you're talking about with regards to Salesforce, and get some experience off the back of that, no matter what it might be, or take experience which may be relevant from a different industry or a different technology. I think if you blend those skills that you have with your own learnings and your own, say, certifications, if you can get those in the Salesforce industry, then yes, I think that's probably the new acceptable. I'm sure there are still organisations, large organisations, and I won't stick my neck out here, but I know when I joined Accenture, you couldn't join Accenture without a degree. I don't think that's necessarily true anymore if you can demonstrate that you've got the right skills and quality that are required to deliver the roles and the projects that we deliver, because it's, it changes all the time, and Accenture and the industry from now to 10 years ago, or when I joined, is a vastly different place.
Yeah, I agree. I think especially with this audience on here, Adam, I'll get you in just a second. We have quite a few folks who have pivoted. Myself, I pivoted after flying for 30 years in all sorts of roles in the military and commercial aviation. And then COVID came along and, Salesforce military, I learned Trailhead and, got certs and now am doing it. So I think it's interesting to look at that, whereas I would have always thought you had to have that traditional computer science degree. And now within Salesforce alone, we see a large mix of folks who have had various backgrounds, and it brings different insight into it. Go ahead, Adam. What's your thoughts?
Thank you, David. If someone on this call has maybe project management experience, Alex, what do you think the best, the fastest path or a path would be for them to kind of, go to be a delivery lead? Is it, would working for an SI, fare better than working directly for a customer? And how would they kind of, grow and get to that next level to become, I guess, a delivery lead of someone in your position?
I guess the answer to that isn't an easy one to provide. I would suggest that if that is your aspiration, then you need to stay open to whatever opportunities come your way. So if that's getting a job as part of a Salesforce team or a Salesforce capability at what I would call a client or a customer, an organization, And that kind of aligns to where you are, or it's your foot in the door so you can get in, get more experience, but also demonstrate what you're capable of, then that may be the right answer for you. If you should, be so fortunate, I say fortunate, I come back to my recruitment story maybe a bit later, but if somebody does come knocking on your door from a large SI and offers you a role or in and around, again, this area of delivery and Salesforce, then maybe grab it. Maybe the opportunity isn't around Salesforce again, and you're open to the idea of going to do something else somewhere for a while in an SI. But again, in organizations like Accenture and like some of the other big guys, they are the lands of opportunity. And if you have the motivation and the drive and the will to get to somewhere, invariably, with enough hard work and talking to the right people, you can get there. I came to Australia with 2 phone calls. I spoke to my boss and said, I really think I want to go to Australia. He phoned somebody in Reading, which was the town down the road from me, and said, you're doing something with Australia, aren't you? He said, yeah, I'll phone the MD in Brisbane. The next day I had a phone call from a guy in Brisbane, and that's it. That's how it happens, So, but I think the key thing there is you have to be open, and it's finding those opportunities and ins so you can build your capability, your skills and experience.
And so that brings a good question. Obviously, working at Accenture, one of the larger integrators out there, can you share a little bit about what your experience has been like in working for a major consulting firm?
Yeah, some of it's been brilliant. I've worked with some amazing teams. Some of it has been hard. I won't lie, there's no point sugarcoating this for you aspiring delivery leads on this call. Sometimes it is hard. And most of the time, the buck stops with you. You're the one who's working, conveying with clients, with CIOs, CTOs, program managers who have very high expectations. And when things aren't going necessarily particularly smoothly, for whatever reason, it can be hard. But for the most part, I find it a very rewarding place to work. And this is the same in every organization. And I know people, when they leave Accenture, and we get these emails that come around occasionally, people always say it's been about the people I've worked with here. And I have worked with some amazing people at Accenture, and that's what brings you to work, most days. It's being part of a team, being part of something that is bigger than just you and what you're doing day to day. Yeah, rewarding, and some of the things that you can achieve. And when I look back and things that we're doing now in this project, I look at and I think, wow, we're doing really good stuff here, really making a difference. Yeah, there's other days when I would probably like to bury my head in the sand for a while.
Yeah, I can imagine. Big projects bring big stress. And so let's go from one accent to another. Iris, you're up.
Accidents? What do you mean there, David?
Accent.
Oh, accents. I'm sorry. I thought you said accidents. Apologies.
That's my accent coming out. You can't understand me.
Oh, thank you so much for being here, Alex. I'm really enjoying this conversation. I love your story about how you got started, and the point I'm grasping is that you said you're not very technical, and you're saying that just trying to get examples of what you mean about finding the opportunities to gain those experiences, because there's a lot of interest in Salesforce. A lot of people are getting certified and then just not sure how to get those opportunities to upskill when they necessarily don't have a job, and there's only so many volunteer opportunities, kind of thing.
Yes, I guess that can be a challenge. I mean, the great thing about Salesforce is, first of all, you do have the ability to get yourself trained and certified without having to be part of another organization. I myself haven't been in a position where I've needed to find that job or a role without always having the security of being somewhere already as part of Accenture. So I'm probably not one to really provide a definitive kind of guide or answer there. For me, when I say I'm not really a very technical person, I'm not a very technical person. Mr. Best can attest to this here, Matt. It's really about leveraging your skills and your other attributes, and this is my story, to be able to open those doors and opportunities. I've got in my list of notes here, my cheat sheet, what's important to me in my success, and for the most part it's about people. And for me, it's probably more around people management, building relationships, being able to have meaningful conversations. So I think for the situations that you're talking about, it's maybe finding those opportunities to go and talk to people and put yourself out there. It may not be going for a job interview and saying, hey, I need some experience, but it may be finding people to talk to that will listen to your story and listen to those goals and aspirations. And I think if people can demonstrate their willingness and drive to improve themselves with regards to Salesforce knowledge and capability, finding whatever there is they can take part in, because I know there's lots of stuff to take part in the Salesforce community to build that reputation. I think we recruited somebody last year here in Brisbane, and it wasn't because they didn't have any consulting skills whatsoever. They'd been working as kind of a one-man band admin in a little company somewhere, but it was what they demonstrated to me with their willingness, drive, and that passion to just learn and know that they want to be part of this greater good in the Salesforce ecosystem that really drew us in. If they hadn't have had that, probably they wouldn't have made it through the process. But because they demonstrated that thirst and passion, it made them stand out from the crowd, and they got the opportunity. And yeah, we recruited them last year.
That's awesome. Thank you so much.
That's somewhere near what you're expecting.
That actually hits on something that we're going to come back to. So I'll give you the teaser for it, Alex, so you can start thinking about it, and that's soft skills. I think a lot of people think, I'm going to go into IT and I'm just going to sit in front of the computer in my pajamas, work from home, and all I have to do is code stuff.
That works for some people, and that is some people's journey.
That's true. But there's actually a surprising amount of soft skills in this, right? Being able to communicate with the customer, being able to communicate with your teammates and other teams. So when you're looking to hire, what do you think about soft skills and what are you looking for?
For me, I'm looking for somebody that is a good communicator verbally, obviously, to begin with, somebody that you can converse with, somebody that you'd be comfortable putting in a situation in the project, in the office, where they may be talking to, typically, in any project, you may be talking to, we have functional consultants or business analysts, even, tech leads and developers who might have to go and talk to business folk. And I guess I'm looking for somebody that is, able to communicate clearly and to demonstrate some understanding or knowledge around how to deal with different people. I think just having that understanding that you can't and you probably shouldn't treat everybody the same or talk to everybody the same is important. So from a recruitment perspective, somebody that can demonstrate when you're talking to them and maybe interviewing them that they're aware of social styles. They understand there are different ways of dealing with different people, and there are different ways of getting the best out of different people with those different styles. I guess at Accenture we've done a lot. I think, it's always been there, but I look back now and I think social styles have really been an important part of our basic training for probably about 8 or 9 years. Actually, for me, it was 10 years when I moved to Brisbane. There were activities on the projects and clients at the time where it was really pushed for people to understand where they sit and how to deal and how to talk to different people with those styles.
like I said, we've got a lot of people on this audience right here who have pivoted or are pivoting right now from previous, career fields. And you don't just have to have that ability to code in Apex, right? You need a whole bunch of skills and a whole bunch of soft skills that maybe aren't really easy to measure.
Yeah, correct. And unfortunately, I'll say this from experience, and you guys tell me if you think I'm right, but I think soft skills are harder for somebody to develop than potentially those technical skills and qualifications. And it's not that you could, people can't work on their soft skills, but again, it takes an awareness and an understanding, and again, an openness that people need to take on board if they think there's this an area where maybe they're not so strong. And there's loads of stuff online around social styles, people skills, and just being aware, again, just being self-aware of where you think you have you perhaps need to spend some time looking to develop those aspects of your professional personality.
David,
Yeah.
I could probably make a little kind of contrast and comparison here. So, if you're thinking about speaking to your CO or maybe, high ranking officers, even up to, if you've had the pleasure of being introduced to colonel or general, it's pretty much the same in the Salesforce industry. So, there's different level of executives and you would need to craft and polish your communication skills for those different levels. And especially being a delivery lead, Alex is often talking to, and myself being a program architect, we're often talking to CTOs. So you would, think about how you would communicate with an executive the same you'd communicate with maybe a high ranking officer.
And that's not just a social style thing there. That's an awareness around who you're talking to and what their interests are. A CTO doesn't have the same interests in in a conversation about the project as maybe your product owner. It's having that awareness of different levels of different levels of information and different types of information that these people want to talk about.
Yeah, I think that is a great point. Who is the audience you're talking to right now? What is their level of understanding and what is their care, right?
Yep.
What are they interested in? You could impress them till next week on that great flow, but if they're really worried about the ROI on things, they're really not probably going to be captured by your cool flow.
Yeah. I've been there many times where you see you've seen that conversation happening, and you can see the smiling and the nodding, but I can see behind the eyes like it's the switch is gone.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah.
I used to say in my previous life, and it's the same in Salesforce. We can teach you Salesforce, right? Trailhead's right there. It's hard to teach soft skills. It's hard to teach judgment. When do I need to go to my boss? When do I need to just beat my head against the wall and try and figure out this flow on my own? Or do I go to someone smarter than me in this field and find out something, right? Those are kind of hard lessons to learn sometimes.
And that's again, I'm not pitching Accenture here, but that's the thing about working with such a big organization, and it's probably the same in Salesforce, is there's so many people to go and talk to and get advice about these sorts of things as well. And when you've been around here for a while, the network that you grow, it's in the thousands. It's in the thousands that you can go and speak to people, and it's very useful.
Yeah, I think that is a critical point, right? In growing in your career is when you're at one of those bigger organizations or a bigger integrator like that, you've got resources that you can go to, right? You can go to an architect who's been there for 10 years and been working in Salesforce. When you're in the smaller teams, it can be a little more difficult because you may just not have that broad depth of knowledge or experience with it. And so it's a little harder to reach into that. And that's where things like this, where you network and brand and use LinkedIn to get those connections and to be able to reach out and be like, hey, I'm working on this. Can I bend your ear for a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely.
So with that, as people are trying to get into the ecosystem, excuse me, what recommendations do you have for those interested in pursuing a Salesforce related role like Accenture, and how do they get their foot in the door?
Well, first of all, applying, but I would also suggest, as I mentioned earlier, reaching out to people, talking to them, sharing your story, sharing your passions. Somewhere like Accenture, if potentially you haven't got a huge amount of what you may be perceived to be relevant experience, you're absolutely right, David. There's still a shortage of people. So I would suggest that you reach out to as many recruitment agencies as you can, where you can make direct contact with some of these organizations, and again impress upon them your drive, your passions. Make sure that those passions, make sure that drive and that self-motivation through progress that you've made, maybe getting your own certs, it comes out on that page. If it comes out on that page, at the moment, you're really likely to probably have a conversation with somebody. And, maybe the first conversation isn't successful, but make sure you go back and you ask for feedback. And for the most time, if somebody comes back and, really asks for feedback, I'll take the time to provide that and say, okay, this is just for the moment where I am. This is why maybe you're not right for the role that I have. But that's not to say that you won't be kept in mind for another role in the future. But at the moment, for me, as I gave you the example earlier, having somebody that doesn't have all the right skills and experience, but has got that passion, that drive, and that when that comes through, it can be intoxicating. And I guess it depends what sort of mood you're in the day, but sometimes that can have a really powerful effect on you when you're trying to look for people. And that's probably the best advice I could give somebody, I think, at the moment.
Yeah, I would agree with you. It's funny. Dave Nava and I have similar backgrounds, and yet we have, I think, very differing views on, I think, branding in a lot of ways. Dave is very big in branding, and I'm almost quasi anti-brand, but I will openly say the 4 jobs I've had since I left the military, which I guess doesn't really sound that great when I say it, but all came from connections on LinkedIn, right? The power of reaching out to someone on LinkedIn and just saying, hey, I am interested in this field. Would you mind spending some time with me? I've never been rejected on that. And I think it's key. I think people would love to talk about themselves or their job. Greg Lee. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Alex.
No, go for it, Greg.
No, I can attest to that, right? But I think doing your homework is also important, Dave. So when people reach out to me, people that like how to show passion, I guess is what I'm trying to get at, right? All people say passionate, but like how do you relate to that to the people that you talk to? And the people that I've been really impressed when people reach out to me through LinkedIn is they don't necessarily like Accenture is a great example, right? I worked at Accenture, and this person actually interested in joining Accenture in their Salesforce practice. So they're very, very like targeted. Targeted. They actually built a targeted audience of the people that actually has a Salesforce background and has a career in Accenture, so they can actually make the connection through me to get to the Accenture, right? So I think and be able to have that understanding and doing the homework of the people that you reach out to and have the questions built. And I think it kind of shows the passion and be able to now the other party be able to take action for you, right? So I think those are kind of the little points are very important when you actually reach out people through LinkedIn.
But if I bring this back, because some of these comments I've been making are kind of quite a bit more generalized, but coming back to a delivery lead perspective and lens, I think showing that passion, that willingness to get into the Salesforce domain is one thing. So getting some certs, showing that you've got, basic understanding or a knowledge of the product, but also then being able to demonstrate and show that other experience you have, because you're not going to jump into a delivery lead or a project management role without having something else, which is, some other experience which will directly translate back over to that kind of work. Otherwise, I think if you are aspiring kind of delivery lead, not saying that my path was perfect, but getting in and showing some of those. If you're technical, there's nothing to say that you can't jump in lower level and demonstrate those skills and pivot, because you can pivot all the time. You don't have to. You start as a developer. It doesn't mean you're a developer for the rest of your life. Or if you're not as technical, things like project management offices are good places to start and learn the how-to of project and program delivery in the IT industry.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to learn. CI/CD is, DevOps, things like that are huge topics that, certs don't really teach you, but certs show that you have the drive and the willpower, because taking certs is not exactly a fun thing. It's somewhat emotional. I've been through some scary things in my life, and I still have a heart flutter every time I press submit on those buttons, And so showing that you can chug your way through those things, yes, there's a difference between having a cert and experience, but until you can get your foot in the door to get that experience, the cert shows that you have the motivation, I think.
Yeah, completely.
But learning the other stuff, DevOps, Agile, things like that, you can learn a little of it from Trailhead and the internet, but until you actually get in there and really do it, it's a whole
yes.
ball of wax.
Scale Agile is a great website if you want to go away, and it's all there. It's all there. You just tap into it. It's got great pictures, processes, flows, and you can get all the information you need to really educate yourself, at least not in a practical manner, but educate yourself to learn some of that Agile capability and skills.
What was that again? What was that website?
I think Scale Agile Scale.
Okay.
I can't remember.
Okay,
It's been a while since I've done it, but it's a good one.
Okay, thank you. I actually did a lot of that with Laura Brandenburg, and that I don't have my admin certificate, and I didn't know about Salesforce when I first started learning about becoming a business analyst. So it took me quite a few years, but I did a lot of the Laura Brandenburg stuff, and I played around on Jira and Confluence, because they've got a very small free version that you can download and play around with. And then through that, I was able to get my first job as a business analyst, although I don't have my admin certificate yet. But I'm working a lot now on the backside of Salesforce, so it's helping me understand. So when I do learn things in Salesforce, I'm able to connect it to what I'm doing at work, some things to what I'm doing at work.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds like getting that foot in the door is wherever and whenever you can take that opportunity is important, because you can grow the rest of the skills and knowledge as you go. It's getting that opportunity, which is sometimes the most important thing.
Yeah, Joe, that's a really good point. Adam here. The Salesforce has a new cert recently put out, which is business analyst, and it actually has all those themes in it. So I encourage anyone who wants to go down that path to do the business analyst cert. I'm told it's a little bit easier than other certs, David. So
I've heard that as well.
Might be less stressful clicking that submit exam button, but yeah, nonetheless, it's good cert.
And I just put the link in the chat there for Scale, the Scaled Agile Framework. That's something that I've studied through Accenture, so it's something that's recognised by some of the larger SIs.
I've actually, Adam, talking about that, been eyeballing the business analyst one for a little bit now, just because of, even as a lead solution engineer, having that business analyst perspective, right, and coming from delivery, and really for the audience we're looking at right here on screen, the business analyst kind of gives you that perspective of how to work with the customer, right? The hard skill of how do I config, how do I do a flow, how do I do Apex, that's one thing. But if you don't understand how to work with the customer and relate to that, you know, it's like being able to cook dinner but having no one to serve it to. So yeah, I'm looking at that one.
And it also, with Agile, there comes a way of writing stories and and then there's sprints and so on and so forth. But with that particular set, it also gives you the Salesforce flavor on top of writing those stories. So as a blank business user, whichever, write your persona there. I want to, so I can. So that, Alex used to say to me, I spend my whole day in Jira. And that's really, a big part of his job. And I didn't really understood what that meant until, recently. But yeah, it's super important for anyone. I think anyone to really understand how to write a good user story as well.
Yes, I have written some doozies before that you come back and read later and you're like, what exactly was I trying to talk about? And for those who have not experienced user stories, it's really a specific format from a certain perspective of what you're trying to write, so that the delivery lead hands that down to the folks who are going to actually do the config work. And so when you get that, and if we're all working from home on different hours, different time zones, and you get that user story and you're looking at it and you're like, I have no idea what you want me to make right now. But the ability to write that good user story and be able to put whoever's doing that config work in the mindset of the person from that perspective, so they can do what needs to be done. It's a bit of an art. You wouldn't think it's that hard. So we're coming up just on the end. So I'll ask one more question, Alex. What do you love most about working in the Salesforce ecosystem?
What do I love most?
That's my hardest question for you.
I think for me, at the time when it came up, it gave me a bit of a new lease on life at Accenture. I think it opened lots of new doors and opportunities. I have thoroughly enjoyed working with the teams and the people that I've got to frequent with. My last project is a very big project, and it brought people in from far and wide. And some of those people had been in the Salesforce ecosystem for years previously, before they were with Accenture, and some outside of Accenture. And I would suggest that those folk actually that I've met over the last few years in Salesforce have become my closest colleagues and friends in Australia. So that has been wonderful. But I think working in an ecosystem and working with a product that is so flexible, sometimes can be configured quickly, other times can be customized out the wazoo and not so pleasant to work around. But it's something that is so flexible and looks great and can really deliver really meaningful change to organizations and businesses, like CRM and I'm doing B2B in Commerce Cloud and all these things at the moment. It's just such a wonderful product that can deliver so much for people. So yeah, it's a great product to work with, but the people in the ecosystem, I think, has really been something that I cherished over the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, I will openly say Salesforce has changed my life, and I know I'm wearing the shirt and I work there, but it really has changed my life. I thought I was going to fly my whole life, which I kind of did my whole adult life, but I absolutely love being here and working in the ecosystem. So before we close, we're at the top of the hour. I'd like to thank Alex for co-hosting tonight's session. It's been awesome having you here and getting your perspective on the topics we discussed. Any closing thoughts?
First of all, it's been a pleasure. Slightly probably out of my comfort zone, but thank you for having me, taking the chance. Well, that's closing thoughts for all you guys here that aspiring delivery leads, or you are delivery leads. It's all about people. People. Don't ever think that it's there's lots of other stuff that goes into being successful, but managing and working with people in a way that everybody enjoys and likes being part of on a day-to-day basis is really what keeps things ticking and makes the world go round. So yeah, my as I said, I'm not a technical person, soft skills, people management is probably more my forte, and that's where I get my most success. I get good people like some of the guys on this call who can help me deal with some of the other problems and issues. But focus on the people, and you can't go far wrong.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. And we can let you get to your workday now. The rest of us, I think, will be taking off for the night. But thank you so much for attending. Thank everyone really for attending, and we hope to see you here next week. Have a great Wednesday night.